Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the members of South Sudan Women Intellectual Forums. My name is Pelek Ayang, Pelek Matthew Wood, and I'd like to welcome you to today's discussion. Today's 16th discussion of SSWI, we will be deliberating on environmental protection. But before we discuss and go into details with our program today, I'd like to take a moment on behalf of the forum to pass our sincere condolences to the families of Edward Jame Andrew and Miss Gelda Gideon Juma, who lost their three children in horrific incidents in Juba last week. May the souls of these three girls rest in eternal peace. As I mentioned, today's discussion, we will be talking about environmental protection, which in itself is a practice of protecting the natural environment, whether it's through individuals, organizations, or governments. The objectives are to conserve natural resources and the existing natural environment where possible, and to repair damages, and in some instances, also to reverse trends. So, South Sudan has been experiencing a wide variety of environmental problems, which includes soil degradation due to the widespread deforestation, with consequent loss of biodiversity and wildlife habitats, pollution of rivers and the environment due to oil drilling in the wetlands, and overexploitation of fisheries, and also conflict. Unknown to many, our country's Buma Junglean equatorial landscape, which covers about 200,000 square kilometers, witnesses the remarkable seasonal migration of the white-eared kob, tiang, and Mangala gazelle. And this migration is one of the three largest animal migrations in the world, after that of the wild beast in East Africa and the caribou in Alaska. So the landscape is also home to the Sud, one of the world's largest tropical wetlands, and hosts Africa's largest remaining wooded savanna. South Sudan faces numerous threats from bushmeat, ivory poaching, and trafficking, and the rapidly expanding charcoal production and climate change. So, since our independence, our country has suffered environmental degradation due to internal conflict and the unsustainable use of its natural resources. The challenges facing South Sudan do not only deplete wildlife and degrade the environment, but it also jeopardizes the potential for livelihood opportunities from ecotourism. Today, we're joined by a number of women, experts, and very distinguished ladies in various capacities working indirectly or directly in the area of environmental protection. Today, we're joined by Honorable Josephine Napon Cosmos, who is the National Minister of Environment and Forestry in the Republic of South Sudan. She hails from Eastern Equatoria and is an elected member of parliament to the National Legislative Assembly in 2010. And before the current position, she served as a National Deputy Minister of Culture, Youth, and Sports. She is very much involved in working with young women and young people in general, especially at the grassroots level. Honorable Josephine, you're more welcome. We're also joined by Dr. Honorable Wudo Jeremiah Udok, who is a member of East Africa Legislative Assembly. She serves in the Committee of Agriculture, Tourism, and Natural Resources, and also the Committee of Communication, Trade, and Investment. She's a graduate from Juba University College of Natural Resources and Environmental Studies, Department of Animal Science. She also holds a Master's of Science in Animal Production from Khartoum University College of Animal Production, and she holds a PhD in Animal Nutrition, College of Veterinary Science, University of Governed Balab for Agriculture and Technology. She's a women's rights activist. She's an activist in climate change, a researcher, a writer, and a politician. Currently, she's the Secretary General for the East African Parliamentary Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition. Honorable Wudo, you're welcome. We are also joined by Ms. Rose Michael Tawil, who works for UNICEF South Sudan Country Office as a water, sanitation, and hygiene specialist. She has almost 2 decades of experience in the field of water, sanitation, and hygiene, also known as WASH, with a focus on both humanitarian intervention and also recovery or slash development phases. Mr. Will has in-depth knowledge of integrated programming with other sectors for delivery of best results for children, including the upstream engagement, building of partnerships with government and other actors. She has been instrumental in the development of WASH legal framework in South Sudan, and she holds a master's degree in environmental science from Kenyatta University, and prior to that, a bachelor's degree with honors from Ahfad University in Khartoum. Mr. Will, you're welcome. We are also joined by Ms. Nyanton Hothmai, who's a program officer in the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources program at the Sud Institute. She holds a Bachelor's of Science in Geology from the Federation University Australia and a Master's of Science in Global Energy and Climate Policy from the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, at the University of London. Nansen is a co-founder and the managing director of My Referendum for Freedom, MRF, that actively engaged South Sudanese youth from all over South Sudan and diaspora as a vehicle for civic education to the rest of the populace during the referendum. She also devoted much of her time to South Sudan community development in Australia. Ms. Nyanton, you're welcome amongst us. We're joined also by Dr. Anne Pita Lomole, who is a trained South Sudanese medical doctor. She currently works as a pediatrician and an infectious disease consultant at the Getry Children's Hospital in Nairobi, Kenya.
Yes.
She's been working in the medical field. She has a master's in pediatrics and child health from Aga Khan University, and also a master's of science in infectious disease.
Hi, I'm here now.
You're welcome. Yeah, she also holds a postgraduate diploma in tropical medicine from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Dr. Anne, you're welcome. Last but not least, we are joined by Ms. Nyamach Hothmai, who is a graduate of Natural Resources Management from the African Nazarene University, class of 2011 in Kenya. She's currently working for Nile Petroleum as a safer section head in Health, Safety, and Environment Department. She's the founder of Future Savers Network, FSN, which is a national NGO that aims to promote environmental protection in South Sudan. And she's also the chairperson of a consortium of youth organizations for local intervention. And also, she's an environmental activist. Nyamach, you're welcome. So without going further, I would like to start with our questions. And my first question would be addressed to Honorable Josephine. So the Constitution of South Sudan spells out in its Section 2 that every person shall have the right to have the environment protected for the benefit of the present and future generations through reasonable legislative action and other measures that prevent pollution and ecological degradation and promote and conserve a secure environment. Honorable Josephine, is there any environmental policy in South Sudan, and what are the key elements in this policy? And if also you might shed light on whether this policy is actually being implemented, and if there are any areas that relate to women or any area that covers gender issues. Over to you, Honorable Josephine. Kindly unmute your microphone. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, my fellow women leaders. I would like to thank you for the time and more especially for welcoming me to join you in this discussion panel. As you might have heard, my name is Josephine Napon. I'm the Minister of Environment and Forestry. Of course, my dear leaders, women leaders, South Sudan has got a policy of environment. And in this policy, the policy was actually passed by the parliament in 2016. The policy is from 2016 to 2026. It was passed by the parliament, and there are also key elements in the policy. One of it is protection, conservation, and also sustainable exploration of our natural resources. Of course, in the policy, it is not actually discriminative. It is regardless of the gender. I think most of the environmental issues that affects our country, I think it is a collective if in terms of challenges or in terms of good things that the environment brings to our people is actually, it is to both women and men. So the environment policy is actually neutral and it is gender sensitive.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable Josephine, for shedding light on the policy. I think later on in our discussion, we might be asking you to go in depth in some of the areas of the policy.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Honorable Wood, if I may move to you. So 80% of our population relies on subsistence agriculture for their livelihood. and their heavy dependence on fuel wood and charcoal is estimated to contribute to an annual deforestation rate between 1.5 to 2%. So climate change could exacerbate access to safe water, lead to poor sanitation and food insecurity. Therefore, a flourishing agricultural sector depends on the viability of land and water resources and is also crucial to long-term peace and development, while disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation measures need to be implemented to build a climate resilient society in South Sudan. So various studies have suggested that South Sudan is food insecure. Can you shed more light on that? Why, whether it's true or not, and also why and why not? And what can be done to resolve this issue. Over to you, Honorable Wudo.
Thank you very much, Paleki. And once again, I really want to add my voice to the forum to condole with the parents of the 3 victims, the young girls who were really brutally murdered in South Sudan. It's a painful thing. And again, I want to thank also the forum for inviting me once again. As you said, for us, we are not an exception. South Sudan has really incurred losses of agricultural production because of the climate change, because we are also facing climate change. Over the years, the temperatures were changing to warmer in South Sudan, and the temperatures were increasing by more than 1.3 degrees Celsius, and that has infected really the rain patterns, which which has affected the agriculture production, and that also increased the food insecurity. And again, we have on that, in addition on that, we have the problem of insecurity itself. So climate change has affected our areas. We have flood everywhere. We have flood everywhere. And right now, our areas are flooding, and some areas also have experienced drought. So we as leaders and as agriculturists and people who are really concerned with climate change, I think we have to work very hard to combat and mitigate those effects on our country, because ultimately will it affect the farmers who really depend on rain-fed farming. And yet our farmers right now, they're really confused of changing the rains patterns, because they're used to get the rains in certain months of the years, and right now it's really changing and they're getting confused. And that's why we also need more meteorological information to our farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Woodle, for your very precise answer. If I may move on to Ms. Nyanton. So climate change and natural hazards have complicated the environmental situation in the country. We are set to have a tropical savanna climate, and within the tropical climate, there is still room for higher temperatures. Before the rainy seasons begin, the temperatures are rising to a maximum of 38 and 40 degrees Celsius. So South Sudan has a very dry winter, if we may even call it a winter, with almost no rain. So most rainfall in South Sudan is between the month of April and October, and the average yearly total for rainfall is approximately 953 millimeters. I want you to speak more towards explaining what is climate change, what causes it, and if you can go also into details about how climate change affects women, and if you can also give examples. Women and girls are said to be affected by climate change more than men and boys. And if you can help us understand the linkages between climate change, poverty, and gender. Over to you, Nyantan.
Thank you so much, Paleki, and all the wonderful women on the forum. Just briefly on climate change. So just to give a brief sort of a definition what climate change is, and I've taken a definition from United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which says that climate change is a change that is attributed directly or indirectly to human activities that alters the composition of global atmosphere, which is in addition to the natural climate and climate variability observed over time. What does this mean basically? What this means is that climate change, let's talk what is climate in the first place before we even talk about change. What is this climate? Climate basically is the mean average of an area, let's say rainfall or temperature, over 30 years period. And when we talk of mean, is that, for example, if we have Juba, where we have a record of temperature every day for the last 30 years. And those temperatures now are divided by 30 years. So it gives us each year what we expect of what each year. And for example, if the mean average of Juba, let's say it's 20 or 30, and then that becomes the climate of Juba. We know that, let's say by April, it's rainy, or let's say the climate is range between 20 and 18. So then now we become certain of what climate of that area is. Now when we talk of climate change, the same actually apply to the rainfall. Within certain area, we know certain area produce certain millimeters of rain each month and each year based on the record of the last 30 years. So now when we talk of climate change is the change of this mean. For example, in most areas of South Sudan, we receive over 500 millimeters of rainfall each year. That's what the record of the last 30 years tell us. But now we have seen there have been changes. Some areas are actually receiving less than the 500 millimeters that we have been expecting for the last 30 years or more. So now there's a problem. When there's less, climate is changing, because we are talking about the mean. And when there is more than 500 millimeters, that means climate is actually changing as well. We are getting flood. So this is basically what this means, what climate change is a change of a mean temperature or rainfall of a given area over a period of time. So you may ask, what caused this change? Why would a climate of an area change suddenly over a period of time? There are different factors that do contribute to these changes. One of these factors is climate natural variability. And what this means is that we have a climate system which is composed of atmosphere, which is composed of snow and ice on the land, which is composed of lakes, oceans, rivers, and then living organisms within the continent. So these are systems that regulate itself naturally without interference of let's say external interference. So what happens is that for the atmosphere, the gases within the atmosphere have changed. And we're talking about carbon dioxide, we're talking about methane, we're talking about nitrous oxide. The concentration of these naturally occurring gases in the atmosphere has increased since 1750, when the Industrial Revolution started. So now these increases of the gases in the atmosphere is causing climate global warming effect. So basically what these gases are doing, they are trapping heat. Before, naturally, the heat would be emitted, the Earth's surface would emit heat to the atmosphere, and then that reflect back, it was self-regulating. But because now these gases have increases more than the natural process that it takes, it traps heat. And then this heat is actually warming the surface of the Earth because it's not being reflected, it's not being emitted, so it's observing it. So now when you have atmosphere that it's more warmer than the natural, how naturally occurred, basically it changes all the other systems that are connected. The climate, as I've just said, climate system. The climate system. So what it does, basically, that as the climate become warmer, it means the ocean that is part of this system become warmer as well. the ice and the snow that covers, let's say, the North Pole or the South Pole started to melt. Let's say the ecosystem that depends on this, right? Let's say the soil start losing, because now the climate is warmer, it start losing water, the leaves, and basically ecosystem or the climate of the area changes. So because of this warming effect, everything basically it's sort of offset. This is now what causes things like things that are things that offset the system. So now when we talk about this, how does this relate to South Sudan? It's climate change, it's a global phenomena, but in South Sudan as well, South Sudan is part of global, it's part of a global system. And basically what we've seen in South Sudan is that the normal rain that our grandfathers, our fathers, even us that have seen for the last couple of hundred of years is changing. Now the rain that used to start early, not the rain that used to start in May, or let's say April, May now, it has changed. So basically the starting months of rain have changed, which affect the community that farm, because now they're not even sure when to plant their seeds and when not to, right? So it becomes very confusing. The other thing as well, the temperature are increasing in some areas, which we have seen in studies that places with increased temperature, they are more drier. That means it's prone to more droughts. So these, in consequences, basically affect the livelihood of our community. When we mostly rely, as a colleague has said before, South Sudan is like 80% rely on subsistence farming. And then when we have these, let's say, increased floods or droughts, basically it does affect our livelihood of our community. Pastoralists who rely on pastures and water, this does affect them. We rely on fish, we rely on this. So basically, this in turn have effect on us. If you've asked about how does this relate directly to women, as we've seen that the study shows that farming is mostly done by women, especially the household headed by women. And because women mostly rely on this subsistence farming, which is relying on environment or climate change, they are directly impacted. The second aspect is the fact that women in South Sudan, we have low literacy rate, which means that most of us don't have other life skills to move away from climate-dependent livelihood to look for other means. So basically, most of us are stuck with just relying on what we produce or what we farm. And the other part as well, that women, as we know, the gender imbalance in South Sudan, where women have no direct access to resources, right? In terms of, let's say in the rural community, like cows and land and things like that, women are limited. So these are some of the part of the factors that do affect women. Kaleki, should I continue, or is that enough for now?
I think we will come back to some of the topics and some of the issues that you mentioned specifically to further unpack the impact of climate change on women and the rural women, especially in South Sudan. So thank you so much for those answers. We will come back to some of these points. I want to move on to Miss Rose Michael. So universal, affordable, and sustainable access to WASH, which is water, sanitation, and hygiene, is a key public health issue within international development and is the focus of the SDGs, especially goal number 6, which talks about equitable and accessible water and sanitation for all. And this particular goal makes specific mention to women and girls having this access. Um, there's a lot of literature out there about the correlation between wash interventions and the wider context of environment and the natural environment, etc. We will be going to you later on to go into details about some of these issues. But now I want you to specifically unpack what is WASH, water, sanitation, and hygiene, and if there are any specific policies that are associated with it in South Sudan. And if some of these policies are also geared towards responding to the needs of women and girls. Over to you, Rose.
Thank you, Beleki, and thank you, the brilliant women of South Sudan. Um, before I start, I just want to say that as a South Sudanese woman, I want to speak here as a South Sudanese and not necessarily as a UNICEF staff, because we have a policy, we have a designated person who is supposed to speak on behalf of UNICEF. And so I am responding in this forum as a South Sudanese woman. To begin with, what is water, sanitation, and hygiene? WASH is a collective term or acronym that stands for water, sanitation, and hygiene. But these three subsectors are interdependent of each other or interdependence in nature. Now, these three forms are core issues that are grouping together to respond to a growing sector, which is WASH. What are policies in South Sudan? Yes, we have policy for water and sanitation in South Sudan, but the policy is more elaborate on water issues, but not specifically broadly on sanitation issues. And this is where right now we are trying to work together with our government to see how we can elaborate more on issues related to sanitation. So we have policies that is addressing water issues broadly, but not necessarily sanitation. Now, this WASH subsector or water sanitation sector normally has a very strong link with health. I think my health colleagues will attest to it. And the WASH is normally working or works on a long-term prevention and control measures for improving health, reduction of poverty, and improving socioeconomic development, as well as responding to global emergencies and outbreaks of life-threatening illnesses. How does WASH relate to women? As you know, before I go forward, I just want to give you a small coverage in South Sudan. South Sudan, the water coverage is stands at 50% people having access to clean water, meaning 50% do not have access to clean water. 14% of the people in South Sudan do not having access to improved toilet, which is sanitation, meaning more than 70% of the people in South Sudan do not have access to sanitation. So these have a great impact in South Sudan community, and most importantly on women. If you look at 70% or more than 70% people, women or people going out on open defecation, that means we have a problem. South Sudan has been hit by cholera outbreak or cholera epidemic. From 2016 to 2018, we have been doing a lot of interventions, mainly just to respond to the needs that tackle the issues of WASH due to cholera outbreak. Now, as we know, women bear a lot of burden when it comes to WASH and water. Women are the main responsible people when it comes to handling of water. And so the women are affected so much by lack of water or WASH services in general. When you look at our community, particularly the rural community, those who are living in the urban setup might be lucky, but those who are living in the rural community are a little bit disadvantaged. But even those who are living in the urban setup, let me use the example of Juba, for example. Let me say 80% or more than 80% of the women or the people in Juba are relying on the water tankering. You can see the trucks moving here and there to ferry water for drinking. Now, this certainly have an effect on women, and that also affect their health. One way or the other, water and sanitation affect women badly or greatly, because without water in the home state, they're not able to do what they're supposed to do. But that not only women, but I also want to talk so much on girls. If you look at the rural communities, our girls are subjected to carrying water to their household to help their families or help their parents. And so in most cases, these girls drops out of school. We have statistics that is clearly tells us that girls drops out, particularly in the rural community, because there are no wash facilities at home or water facilities at home. And so hours that these children are supposed to be spending in classrooms, these children are spending actually ferrying water. And you will find that the distance between their home state to the water facilities is more than 30 minutes walking, or sometimes search of water, really, searching of water sources and so forth. So this has, impacted on the women and the girls badly. The issues of GBV related to WASH is also one issue that we are also tackling, because as these women go around to look for water, there's a lot of assault that happens to the girls or to the women. Right now, as this country is going through a lot of issues, women in the rural areas are not safe. When they go to look for water, that is where a lot of GBV related to WASH are happening. So I can say that WASH, when it comes to linkages between water, women, it's women are greatly disadvantaged. When you look at sanitation, particularly, in some areas, like I say, more than 70% of the women or the people of South Sudan are practicing open defecation. Meaning, these women, either they go very early in the morning to look for where to help themselves, or they have to wait until it's evening time. That also have a health impact negatively on the women and girls. When you talk about girls dropping from schools, there are other issues also linked to girls, which is the menstrual hygiene management. These girls, when they go to school and there are no wash facilities, meaning dropping out of these girls from schools because there are no wash facilities in schools, and particularly when they are on their menstruation period or menstrual time, these girls cannot afford to stay at school because in some communities, menstruation are looked at as a taboo, or there's a stigma linked to menstruation. And so we found that majority of women, or rather girls, dropping out, particularly when the wash facilities are not provided in schools. Maybe later on, I'll give more details on what does that mean, particularly to the school children. But for now, I want to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rose, for elaborating on the multisectoral nature of WASH. Because when you think about WASH, sometimes people look at it from a very narrow perspective, but it has social, economic, etc. impact. So thank you so much for highlighting that. And the things that you mentioned about water nicely introduces us to the next question that goes to Dr. Anne. We talk about air quality. Air quality is also part of the environment, and air pollution is a major environmental risk to health, and it is estimated to cause approximately 2 million premature deaths worldwide per year. So that's a very significant number. So a reduction of air pollution is expected to reduce the global burden of disease from respiratory infections, heart disease, lung cancer, etc. Dr. Anne, if you can speak to how air pollution and also how water pollution generally affects health, and if you can connect that also to areas of sanitation and things like sewage, disposal, water resources, etc. And if you can a little bit shed light if there is any specific thing or area that women should look out for. Over to you, Dr. Anne.
So thank you very much, Paleki, for that question. And when we look at pollution in general and the way it affects health, I think it's wider than most of us are able to actually see. So maybe I'll start with air pollution, and basically what air pollution is the presence of toxic gases or contaminants in the air that are harmful. And they can be divided into many different ways. So you can either say natural causes of air pollution, like things like volcanic eruptions, methane gas, which comes from organic things that break down. You can talk about man-made causes, which can be anything from smoking to industry emissions to chemicals that are produced by manufacturing industries. And then you can also look at it in view of whether it's indoor or outdoor. With indoor, we're talking about things that happen within the home, and outdoor, anything that happens outside the home. Now, the other way to look at it is to look at what is causing the pollution. So we think about gases like nitrous oxide, we think about particulate matter, which basically refers to particles in the air that react with air pollutants and are able to get into our breathing systems. And we talk about gas, basically like methane gas. Now, how does air pollution affect health? The most common way that air pollution affects health is actually the way it affects our breathing system, what we call the respiratory system. And what has been found to be most associated with issues with the breathing system is particulate matter. Particulate matter is a problem because it's able to get into our lungs and get all the way into the pipes of the lungs to the point of what we call the alveoli, which is basically where the exchange between air from the environment and the blood occurs. So when this particulate matter gets into the lungs, what happens is that the body responds as if it's being attacked, and it sends out its soldiers, what we call the immune system. And what the immune system does is that it releases substances and sends cells to those areas to try and fight off that whatever is attacking the system. In this case, it's not an infection really, it is matter and pollutants. And this can go into overdrive, resulting in something called chronic inflammation. And inflammation basically, because of the response of the body to what it thinks it's attacking the system, ends up causing damage to the lungs. Now, the lungs might be affected, and people usually have things like COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, where the lung is not able to function the way it should, and some of them even develop asthma. In fact, it's been found that about 14% of children get asthma because of air pollutions and air pollutants. Indoor pollution has been what has been most associated with issues with respiratory illnesses, because women and children are the ones who are most exposed to that, because they're the ones in the kitchen and they're the ones who are dealing with the food and dealing with the fuels that are used to cook our food. Now, when that happens, then when the particulate matter gets into the lungs, sometimes it's able to cross over into the blood and go to other organs. And a similar reaction occurs in the other organs, in the sense that the body tries and fights it as if it's fighting an infection, and it leads to inflammation, which leads to destruction. And sometimes when that goes into overdrive, it can even lead to cancer. And some of the things that have been associated with air pollutants are effects on the unborn baby, affecting their growth, affecting their brain development. And you know that if the brain development is affected, then it also affects the kind of individual that person will be when they become adults. and that affects their ability to contribute to society, which leads to poverty, which leads to a whole cycle of other things that are related to health issues. Now, when it comes to water pollution, we talk about various things that pollute water. So we talk about biological contaminants, we talk about chemical contamination, we talk about radioactive contamination, and we talk about physical contamination. Now, when we're talking about sanitation, it's basically about provision of clean, safe, and adequate water, and also provision of facilities for human waste disposal. Now, the issue with contamination of water is that it actually contributes to a huge burden of disease, in the sense that especially when we're talking about biological contaminants, where we talk about things like viruses and bacteria and parasites. And one of the panelists was talking about cholera, which is one of the bacteria that is spread when there are issues with a supply of adequate and clean water. And it can result in pandemics that actually lead to many deaths and lead to diarrheal disease. And diarrheal disease is a known cause of malnutrition, especially in the under 5, and a known cause of mortality in the under 5. Some of the viruses that are associated with issues with water supply are things like polio, which has been eradicated in some parts of the world, but is still present in others. Hepatitis A, I know some people have heard about it, which causes diarrheal disease, but sometimes can cause liver failure, where your liver just shuts down completely. Parasites have been associated with water pollution. I know amoeba is a very common one. Some of the common bacteria associated are things like typhoid. Now, most of the diseases caused by inadequate water supply and issues with sanitation are diarrheal diseases, but there are many others that can also occur, including the guinea worm infection, which I think is quite common in South Sudan, and things like trachoma, which lead to blindness, because if you're unable to have water, then you're unable to practice good hygienic measures, and this might lead to you transmitting infections either to yourself or to the people around you. When it comes to chemical contaminants, we are talking about things like lead in water, especially when it comes to plumbing, which can cause issues with mental retardation. It can cause issues with brain development. We're talking about things like arsenic, which results in poisoning and causes issues also with the brain. So there are quite a number of things that might get into the water that are toxic to the human body. Physical pollution basically refers to, physical contamination of water refers to like dumping of garbage, or basically things that might block water flow or result in stagnation. And you know, when water has stagnated, then it's very easy for vectors to breed. And vectors are basically insects that spread infection, things like mosquitoes that spread malaria. So we find that there's a lot of interconnection when it comes to air pollution and water pollution. And the degree of illnesses that is caused by water pollution is quite high, and it leads to a very many deaths in children who are under 5. So what is important to note is that, as Rose was telling us, that we need to provide adequate water supply, we need to provide sanitation facilities, and we also need to promote hygiene practices, because the two cannot go without hygiene, which is one of the most effective public health interventions in terms of preventing disease. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Anne. You just gave us a lot of information in a very short period of time, and I think I find it really, really interesting and very informative. Looking at how some of these things that we tend to turn a blind eye to might actually have impact on children, unborn children, and generations, and impact might go for a very long time. So thank you so much for highlighting some of these issues. I want to move to Ms. Nyamach. You are an environmentalist, and environmentalists make use of science to find solutions and identify issues that minimize the impact of humans on Earth. You are also environmentalists are also lobbyists, and they can help prepare green policy for the governments and nonprofit agencies and companies. Um, Environmentalism in itself can be described as a social movement or as an ideology focused on the welfare of the environment. They seek to protect, conserve the element of the earth ecosystem, including water, air, land, animals, and plants, along with the entire habitat such as rainforests, deserts, and oceans. Ms. Nyamach, there are world leaders who have made very public statements about climate change being a hoax, and there's the whole conversation about environmental conservation is not necessary. If you can shed more light and give us some very concrete reasons, why do we need to protect our environment? And also, if you can speak to your role as an environmentalist, what are some of the roles and things that you have done in South Sudan? Over to you.
All right, thank you, Paleki. I'm very delighted for this privilege for us to meet and discuss very important aspect of our life. Let me start first. Before we go to our roles and environmental protection, we really need to define what the environment is. I know there might be people outside there who don't even know what is the environment. Environment is a surrounding or conditions in which a person or animal or a plant live. This one include the biotic factors, which is the living organisms, the air, the water, and the land we're living in, and all the physical conditions, the physical conditions. So this is our environment. Why do we need to really protect the environment? You know, our environment, since it's your surrounding, then we have to protect it because our environment provides us with food. Our environment, if we don't protect it, we heard from the previous speakers that we have diseases like cholera from water pollution. We have like asthma and other respiratory diseases from air pollution. Our environment, you know, give us clean water and so many other things that really the environment provides for us. And that one would really need our efforts to protect the environment for us to live in a good place and for our well-being. The environmentalist role in South Sudan, you know, I'm happy that the minister is here, and most of the time we meet the undersecretary and we push for some things. In June, 2 months ago, we actually went to the ministry. She was away, but the undersecretary was there, and we submitted a petition on waste management because for those of you who have been in South Sudan, we know waste management is a big problem, and one of the challenges that we are facing in the country, that our roads, our homes, our rivers are actually polluted. And if you go through the Juba city, I don't talk about the other places, but in Juba, you find heaps of garbage really being dumped everywhere, even on the roadside. You know, for recreational purposes, our environment is not clean. We have visitors who will come and see South Sudan, and once they see our streets are invaded by heaps of garbage, then that would portray really very bad image to the country. And with that garbage on the streets, they actually decompose, and sometimes they form some elements like the greenhouse gases that will also go to the air that contribute to global warming and climate change that everyone is talking about, which is the pressing environmental issue. These heaps of garbage are also washed to our streams, you know, they're washed to our rivers, and there will actually be a very big challenge to our aquatic lives like the fishes and the other things, and contaminate the water that we actually use. In Juba, we are using the water from the river. So you can imagine all this garbage, all this waste, the municipal waste is being washed to the rivers, and the same river, we're going to get the water for drinking or water for cooking in our houses. So it's really very important for us to protect our environment because it's actually for our well-being. If we don't protect it, we are not food secured, you know. If we don't protect it, we'll have diseases. If we don't protect it, we have a lot of issues. We have the climate is changing. You know, in South Sudan, we're using generators. We are importing cars that nobody is even inspecting, you know, and they come here, they are being disposed by those countries. And when they come here, there's a lot of emission. of these gases to the atmosphere, which will cause a lot of issues. Even though air pollution is not really a very big challenge to our context because we don't have big industrial, operations in the country. But I think from these used cars from Japan, from where that are not really checked well, you don't know when they were made. We don't have a specific regulation of which kind of vehicles that should be brought into the country. Some of them, you bring them in 1 month time, they're actually not working and they emit a lot. So Paleke and the rest who are listening, it's very important for us to really protect our environment. When we come to the roles of us as environmentalists, our role is to advocate. The first thing is for us to advocate because the environment will not speak for itself, And since we know that our environment is very important for us, then we have to come up and advocate for environmental justice. We advocate for environmental protection and conservation because also, the environment is providing us, if we see the context of Kenya, most of their revenue comes from tourism. And tourism is actually about the wildlife and all these environmental things that they have. So within our country also, we need to protect our wildlife so that also we don't just depend 89% on the oil revenue. We have a lot of wildlife in the Sud. We have our swamps. We have a lot of them that can really be another revenue that can be generated from this tourism instead of us relying 80% or 98% on the oil revenue. So our role is also to create awareness. Many people in South Sudan are actually not aware, of even their environment. When you talk of the environment, many people don't even know that there is a ministry exists that is for environment. And even when we see our government, the Ministry of Environment is actually neglected. It's not even so much considered like other ministries. Even in the annual budget for the country, I also see very little is given to the Ministry of Environment because we don't see the importance of this ministry. So it is our role as environmentalists to blow the whistle that there is a need for us to protect the environment, because if we don't protect it, then where will the economy come from? Where will we get the money? Because we have to export instead of importing things. We have to export things for us to get money. We have a very fertile land that we can produce, and it actually can be a breadbasket for the whole East Africa. So the other role is for us to educate. Environmental education is a very key element, in a country, that we have to enlighten people on the environmental issues globally and nationally, and how to deal with such issues and how to tackle them. And the main things now we are talking of this climate change. We know in Juba or in South Sudan, we're having floods. In some other areas of parts of the country, we're having droughts. We're having disease outbreaks. We're having a lot of issues even in our oil producing areas like Paluch. We have deformities. Children are born with deformities. Their water is polluted there, and the environment totally is just polluted. So it's our role also to bring into attention that there are some things, operations that are going on and are actually harmful to the environment. If the environmentalists don't come up, this is our role to bring it even to the attention of the public that, look, there is something that is happening in this area, it's because of this and that. So this is our role in the environmental protection. We have to push the government to enforce some laws, to implement some policies, and also to pass some bills, concerning the environment, so that everybody goes, in line with international protocols and also national treaties. So basically, those are our roles. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nyamach, and I appreciate the information that you provided and also connecting all the dots. And I think it's very important that we educate ourselves, we educate our communities. The question of environment is not something that is concerning a particular community or a particular group of people. It is something that affects each and every one of us, and it's something that concerns the future generations. So thank you so much for highlighting these points. And some of the things that you mentioned also nicely connects to the next question that I have, that goes to Honorable Josephine. We have been discussing a lot about how to protect the environment, the need to protect the environment. We talked about climate change. We talked about pollution from the oil fields, etc. Honorable Josephine, if you can give us some practical examples of how the government and the government of South Sudan manages and protects the environment, not only from things like plastic pollution, but also from things like deforestation. If you go along Juba, you find these heaps of charcoal, and around December, January every year, even if you're living in the city, we get these black ashes that sometimes you can't even wear a white shirt. If you walk down the street, you get these black ashes that are coming from trees that are being burnt in the outskirts of the city. So if you can give us some practical examples of how government protects the environment.
Yeah, thank you, my sister Paleki. I think the Ministry of Environment and Forestry has developed environmental guidelines and standards to protect the environment. The cardinal requirement is conducting the environmental and social impact assessments on all aspects. It is true that when you see in South Sudan, the only source of energy is actually firewood. As we know, during the 21 years, we have never moved from where we are to the modern ways of cooking. So South Sudan generally depends on charcoal, and it depends on the firewood. The results of destruction of the forest is actually by cutting the trees in order to get the charcoals for the honey. It is sincerely that the ministry is trying its level best in making sure that our environment is actually protected. More especially, there is a policy that we have: when you cut one, you plant 5. But all these policies is not being implemented by our people because of the insecurity that we have in the country. And also our people don't respect the laws. No matter you do what, most of our people don't respect the laws. And more especially the law enforcing agencies. These are the people who break the laws. And if you see around Juba, the people actually cutting the trees or logging, it is actually, most of them are our soldiers. So we, as a ministry, also is finding it very difficult, actually, to put all these things into rest because of the insecurity that we have, and more especially in our forest. Everyone in the forest in South Sudan is having a gun. So, and the ministry, as one of my sisters has said, is one of the ministries which is paid less. The budget of the ministry is limited, that we cannot do anything. But through our partners, they have been helping us. But since the violence broke in 2013, our partners cannot come in. They always tell us until we have a sustainability of peace in our country. So it has made us so much difficult to exercise what the ministry is supposed to be doing. Also, I want to talk on the plastic bags. I think, as one of my sisters has said, the concern in Juba is actually for us to eradicate this waste management. Juba is a very dirty city. I acknowledge that. It's really dirty. But again, the cleanup of this Juba city is purely the work of the Juba City Council. And in all the towns of South Sudan, there are municipalities, and it is actually purely the work of the municipalities to make sure that the towns are clean. But all in all, I think the Juba City Council has not been doing their best to keep Juba clean. But as a ministry, we are coming in to give an advice or to give some policy guidelines that will make them actually to do something. Of course, they are also taking levies in the market. There is environmental levies that the Juba City Council is taking, but they are not doing their work. But we are trying our level best with the help of JICA. We have some projects that is on pipeline. Those projects are actually to improve the waste management within the Juba City Council, within the Juba City, and we are working hand in hand with the JICA to make sure that this comes to an end. We are also planning as a government to launch a one-day launch for keeping Juba clean and most of our towns. And this one is going to be launched by the government officially. And then we'll identify as a ministry, we identify at least 1 day per week that all of us will come out to do the cleanness, at least for the duration of 4 months. And then after that, and then we'll hand over now to the Juba City Council. That is what we have come up with as a ministry. About the pollution, I think the pollution is real, and all of us might have seen what is happening in the oil field. The pollution in the oil field is real, and we are also tight, our hands are tied up. If you go into the Ministry of Petroleum, I think there is an act that they have adopted from South Sudan that gives them the right to produce the oil and at the same time to audit themselves. And auditing is purely the work of the Ministry of Environment, but also we have some implications on legal aspects. But as a ministry, we are trying our level best actually to do, we have already started, we are doing auditing to the oil fields companies. Of course, I went to the oil, I think 3 times, I visited the oil field, but what is in the oil field is something else. It is not what is being reported. There is actually pollution in the oil field. That if South Sudanese don't actually come together so that we fight the pollution, I think in some years to come, most of our people, when you give in the health aspect, will be so much affected and we shall be having so many diseases that are not really good for health. So it is actually a collective responsibility that all of us should do. And if you come again back to cleanness, I think South Sudanese have got that habit of not honing cleanness as your home. The cleanness starts from home and then to the neighborhood. But our people don't take environment as very important as it is. As my sister said also, I think environment is one of the ministries that is being neglected a lot. And they put it as a ministry that doesn't have any role. But all of us know that environment is life and we really need to protect environment. And through these forums, I think most of the people will know the importance and all of us have to fight for the environment in the part of South Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Justin, for highlighting the initiatives that the government is undertaking to further protect our environment. Thank you for highlighting those. Honorable Lugo, if I can move over to you. We have already talked about the multi-sectoral nature of environmental protection, and I would like you to shed light on some of the environmental issues that are relating to agriculture and food security in South Sudan. And also, if you can speak a little bit on how global warming is affecting the country, some practical examples. Thank you. I think Honorable Wood has dropped. Okay. Honorable Wood, did you hear my questions or should I repeat them?
No, I think you should repeat that. Keep on, I don't know what's wrong. I'm not hearing properly and I keep on dropping, but kindly if you can repeat your questions. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is in regard to environmental protection and relating that to agriculture and food security in South Sudan. And also, if you could speak a little bit about how, I know you mentioned early on about the temperatures in Juba and many parts of the country and the rainfall, and if there are any other additional examples of how global warming is affecting South Sudan.
Thank you very much, Palegi. As I've mentioned before that South Sudan has really experienced changing in the rain patterns, and that one has really made the temperatures to be warmer, and it has increased the temperatures, and that's has affected the agricultural sector because, as said by one of the participant here, that agriculture has really been affected because the farmers are really confused of the the rain patterns and when should they really dig or plant their plantations, or when will they not plant. So that has really make a lot of confusion in the rainy in the cultivation. The other thing is that our rivers also has been affected because we have small streams and small rivers which has been really affected by the temperatures and the drying off, and that also is affecting part of the population who really depends on these rivers and these small streams. And the other thing is that these temperatures also, in some areas, they make we don't have that wildfires, but also like some places where there's dry plants and dry cultivation. Sometimes it can produce some fires which really affect the areas. And most of the problem which is facing South Sudan now is also the deforestation of our forests, because you know, Palegi, that our forest is being deforested, and the annual deforestation rate is from 1.5 to 2%, which is really very high. And that's also is affecting the agriculture, because some of these forests were helping to bring us some rains, but now we don't have those rains, and most of our farmers are depending on the rain-fed agriculture. So as a country, we really need to depend on the irrigation, and also help our farmers to have some extension and some other alternatives to the farming, because as a country we are facing insecurity, food insecurity in many of our places. So really, as South Sudan is being affected with the climate change. And the other thing which I want also to throw the light, and with the presence of our honorable minister, is that in South Sudan there was a bill which is supposed to be enacted for the environment, but it has been in this one in the assembly, but I don't know if they really pass it. And I want to ask the honorable minister if she can also give us the information on that one, and the policy also for the environment. We have done an oversight as ESC Legislative Assembly, and we have found that our policy of the environment in South Sudan is it's being developed, and it has been passed by the National Legislative Assembly. But I think because of the many things which are happening in the country, by January 2020, it has not been assented by His Excellency the President. So I think I'm just taking the opportunity, if the Honorable Minister can just inform us if that policy has been really assented to by His Excellency the President, and if the Bill of the Environment has been passed by the Transitional National Legislative Assembly.
Honorable Josephine, if you were to maybe respond to that.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable. I think the bill environmental bill is not stated in the Parliament, and it has taken some years because it took time in the Ministry of Justice. As we all know, in the Ministry of Justice there are so many files, and most of the bills are stuck by the Ministry of Justice. So the bill, the environmental bill, is not yet. But the policy of the environment is in the office of the president. But we all know by law, when it takes 30 days or a month, you assume that the policy is already assigned by the president, according to the law. So we are already using and implementing the same policy. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Palegi. I keep on. I'm really not getting whatever's happening very well because I think I have there is breakage in the voice. Even your question, I didn't get it very well, but I'm trying just to.
Okay. If I
Hello,
may just,
are you getting me well?
we can hear you very well, Honorable Wood.
Yeah,
Let
even
me just,
if you mute, I think.
I wanted to reiterate what Honorable Josephine said, and that the bill for the environment, because also her voice is a little bit unclear. The bill for the environment bill is still not yet through, and she mentioned that the policy is in the office of the president. However, they're currently using it. If I have captured what Honorable Josephine said clearly. Yeah, but I think there's an issue with the sound. But Honorable Wooden, you can go ahead and summarize, and maybe in your summary, if you could just if you can just make reference to some of the things that as citizens, as individuals, we can some of the actions we can take to reverse the impacts of the environment, environmental degradation, and all that's happening. If you can just give some few actions that individuals can take upon themselves as the legal and policy framework is yet to be developed. I don't know if you heard my question. You have been muted. Please unmute yourself. Okay.
Thank you very much, Palegi, and I'm really sorry because I couldn't get most of even the participation, but this one a little bit I got it clear. You know, Palegi, as a regional parliament, we do an oversight in all the partner states. And even how I come to know that the policy was not assented to, and also that there is a bill, environment bill, which is there in the judiciary, which need to be taken to our transitional national legislative assembly to be passed, because we have done an oversight on environment and on the pollution in all the partner states, so that we compare. Because in 2019, I've moved a motion in our assembly there to, we have an ESC policy, but we don't have an East African climate change bill. And that policy has been developed from 2011, and it was a result of the head of state recommending that the ESC has to have a policy in place. And that was in 2019, and it took 2 years to be developed. And it took another, I think, 8 years, because now we are in 2020, for the bill to take place. And right now, is even as I'm speaking, there is no East African community bill on climate change. And in 2019, I've moved a motion to urge the Council of Ministers so that they bring the East African community climate change bill. And upon that, the Council of Ministers has recommended the Assembly to do an oversight in the 6 partner states, so that we know and we estimate the climate change effect on this country, and also know how these countries are dealing and trying to mitigate the climate change. And we have found that South Sudan is not an exception. It has really been affected by the climate change because of many things: the deforestation, the soil erosion, the temperature rising, and also because of insecurity. And Honorable Josephine was one of the ministers who really did very well in the Ministry of Environment, because I got a report, Honorable Josephine, you have done it in 2018 with the UN, and that report was given especially specifically what is the reasons for the climate change in South Sudan. Part of it is also this, the effect of the oil companies, because they don't do environmental impact assessment very well, and sometimes some of our government officials bypass this because of a little bit of them being given some things here. And I'm sorry to say this, but some of our big people really sometimes they bypass these laws. And this one I can even refer it to to the lack of awareness, because the little money you get to bypass a very important law, you don't know the effect, which has our doctors here has mentioned. This effect even goes to the physical well-being of our people, kids getting aborted, miscarriages, all these things because of the pollution in the oil fields, and also because right now, as I said, the illegal logging of our forests, which is very rampant. You know, as East African Legislative Assembly, we have caught some of like 25 lorries in Numuli, and they are being taken far to India, you can imagine. And these people have a license from government officials to take this, and you will wonder how much is the price of the lorry. It's less than $4,000. So all these things are really affecting our environment. But what I can say is we really need to raise the awareness of our people. Sud Institute is doing very well. We have met them. They're doing really very well, even outside Juba, because sometimes when we speak about Sudan, most people, South Sudan, they're concentrating only on Juba. But I found that Sud Institute is going to the other states, is giving awareness to the local people. We have really to enhance our meteorological information so that we give awareness to our people in different languages. We have to mainstream this climate change thing in the ministries which are related, because as it's said by one of the participants here, that there is lack of funding to the environmental sector. I can agree with most of us that there is lack, and also any climate related issues, they are not really mainstream in the national budget, which is really, you know, climate change is expensive. If you want to mitigate it, you need to also like go to smart farming, sometimes adapt and introduce seeds which are really which can sustain the floods and can sustain the drought, and all these things need some research. They need people to go outside and give awareness for our people. And you know, when I say awareness to the people, is not one language, two languages, not Arabic, it's not English. You need to go also local languages so that these people can also understand. And also, one of the problems which we have found that the country is facing the lack of control on the mining industries. You know, that's another problem also. I think Honorable Josephine, Minister of Environment, should take note of that, that the mining industry are really using sometimes chemicals which are prohibited. As some of the doctors said here, the lead, all these poisons things, they're using them to extract some of these mines, and there is no control from the part of the government on that. I'm sorry to say that, and all these things lead really to pollute our environment.
Thank you.
Hello?
Thank you very much, Honorable.
Yeah.
Yes, we could hear you. Thank you so much for highlighting some of the challenges that we're experiencing in the different sectors. Thank you for highlighting that. And later on, we will ask, in the next round of questions, we will ask Honorable Josephine to respond or give remarks or recommendations to some of these issues. Thank you. Ms. Nyanton, if I may move on to you. We've talked a lot about the oil sector and the pollution and the health impact of the oil sector pollution on the individuals that are living around the oil fields. Are there any other concerns or dangers that are posed to these people other than the health related dangers? And what steps could possibly be taken to prevent or to mitigate some of these dangers or negative impacts? Over to you, Nyanthon.
Thank you once again for the opportunity. Yes, as Dr. Wood have mentioned, at Sudan Institute, we've done a lot of research on the oil producing areas, and primarily we have focused on haulage and visited the area. And I remember one of our last projects, actually, we went to Koloch to sort of assess and investigate what are some of the impact of oil production within this region on the environment and then on the health of the people. And as already, some of these impacts have already been mentioned, and some of health implication that we find actually because we talked to some of the community members was that, as Nyamach has mentioned before, that there's a increased number of reports that we got that there are children who are born deformed. Women have talked of high frequency of miscarriage. Men have even mentioned as well that they are getting blind younger. And you find actually really young men have side issues. And as well, we did those report that even the soil that they used to farm is being contaminated. And some of the women and even the men did report that when they touch the soil, somehow they start developing rashes around their hands and their fingers. And suspect that some of this is basically chemical on the soil, which is produced from the oil field. So some of all this definitely are affecting the area. And then some of the other aspect that came up was basically it's the job opportunity as well for the local there, which is the local content. They're saying that even though the oil production is in their areas, they are not being employed. Most of the employees are being brought from, it's outside the country or outside the region of the South Sudan, in which as well they should, and they expect that what they need to benefit from is for them to be employed. And then as well, things like diseases, right? When you move, let's say HIV, when you move employees from other countries, it's easier for them to transport some of the diseases as well to the local. So some of these issues all came up in our research, and what we find that the community are very much frustrated that the government is not listening to their complaint, their impact, and as well, what should have been done by government is to transport these people out. Sorry, my son is distracting me. Can you go? So some of this, what should have been done was that this local community need to be relocated out of the oil field to a safer place where government can provide them with services. This is not happening. There's a lot of negotiation, government saying that the community are refusing. The community are saying that they're not being consulted enough for them to be removed. So this is one of the biggest issue and concern that's going on in the oil areas. And these guys are frustrated. And if government doesn't take action earlier, you never know, because some people are saying that, we're even dying anyway, we're going to be extinct. And if government doesn't take, they can even take law in their own hands, which is not good. So this is one of the concerns that we got. And what needs to be done is that government is not, if government is not really believing the stories the community are saying. That's why we at the Student City Department of Research, we actually call for a comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment, a scientifically conducted study that is not influenced by the government and it's not just what the community say, but at least test the water, test the air, as well test the community, take their blood samples, right? And then as well do like a proper scientific assessment. And then from there now, we will have an independent verification of what is being said. And if indeed it's true that yes, community, which we have seen, the stories that we're hearing tell that yes, something is going on wrong, but because there's no scientific studies, people are saying that it's being politicized, people are making lies. So we have always been advocating that let this environmental impact assessment be done, but we need it to be done in a transparent way. Citizens need to be involved, the civil society, we need to be involved, we need to do an oversight in how this thing is being conducted. Already the Ministry of Petroleum have taken step forward. Last time I heard the bidding was publicly announced, so that the international environmental firm was called to sort of conduct this environmental assessment. So within this, now we'll have a complete, comprehensive overview of what are these concerns the community are saying, and how can this community now be compensated properly, and how can we as well as a country benefit well from the oil, because we can't benefit from the oil when there's other community who should even benefit are negatively being impacted. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nyamton, for highlighting these issues. We're running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to kindly ask the coming panelists to just limit their answers to about 3 to 4 minutes so that we can have time to give recommendations and way forwards. So, Ms. Rose, if I may move to you, if you can speak to some of the traditional or cultural way of our cultural and traditional way of life that affect our response to WASH programs, and also if you can talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you encounter when implementing or WASH programs. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Paleki. Traditional or cultural ways of belief affecting our response to WASH is many, particularly in South Sudan setup. And also the diversity of South Sudan also have an impact on our interventions to WASH. When you go to other areas, you find that people believe that natural water sources or natural water resources are linked to their ancestral spirit. So when it comes to protecting the water sources, it becomes an issue, because they believe that these water sources are linked to their ancestral spirit, or they have some cultural beliefs that is attached to their water sources. And so sometimes really tackling the issue to protect the water sources becomes an issue. The other belief is that water is a free commodity in South Sudan. When we introduced the issue of water tariff, it was a big problem. Currently, some of the panelists have talked of the water bill that are stuck in the Ministry of Justice. Water bill is also stuck in the Ministry of Justice. And we were trying to push that water bill so that we can regulate, or the government can regulate, the tariff system. But currently, it's an issue. It has not been passed simply due to the current crisis. This has been put, I think, some years back. Now, with this, pushing the issue of water tariff becomes an issue, because majority of the people believe that water is a free commodity, which in the actual fact is not a free commodity, because when we want to provide clean water, there's a lot of aspect goes with it. Toilet, when it comes to sanitation, is a taboo in most of the South Sudan communities. And it's a silent subject that people are not supposed to talk about sanitation when you go to some other areas. But when you also go to other areas, there are taboos that are beneficial to the community. I'll take an example briefly. When you go to other communities, for example, it's a shame to use toilet or sanitation facility with your in-laws and so forth. But also, if you go to other communities, you find that sanitation, people are not, people don't want their waste to be seen, because someone can bewitch you. So that also has an impact, a positive impact by that particular community, to make sure that the sanitation facilities are put. Some communities also believe that when you go rampantly defecating outside, it's a prestige, by meaning that it's a well-nourished home state. So these all have an impact on our interventions. Sharing of toilets is an issue, like I said, and then also Nomadic communities, they are always on the move. Addressing the issues of wash becomes a big problem. Someone has, Dr. Anne has mentioned the issue of guinea worm. We would have eradicated guinea worm long time ago in South Sudan. But because of a particular kind of habit in South Sudan, we are not able to eradicate guinea worm in South Sudan. And guinea worm goes along with lack of water, and then drinking contaminated water, it spreads the guinea worm infection. So this is really one challenge that we are facing, particularly with the nomadic community, in addressing the issues really of wash facilities. Now, the other thing is wash is seen as a male domain. So when it comes to women addressing issues of water, it's an issue in South Sudan, because it's many people, let me talk of professionals, do believe that wash is more of engineering field of work or engineering intervention, which in the actual fact it's not. And this more particularly when it comes to hygiene promotion to the people. I think that is in brief, that is the traditional belief that is impacting negatively on wash interventions. But then also the rampant fighting in South Sudan has really made wash intervention very, very difficult, because there are many communities outside there who need these services and they're not able to be reached simply because of the insecurity. That makes us makes our people very vulnerable when it comes to wash interventions. Some of the challenges that we encounter, particularly with the wash, there are also many challenges, but I wish to mention the issue of inadequate or weak leadership and political will from our government. Water is not seen, just like environment sector, it's not seen as a critical sector that really needs to be, attention needs to be paid to. I was involved in the budget, the South Sudan strategy development. And when I looked at the budget that is put for water, and let me say the social services, it is very disturbing. These are social services that the people of South Sudan need, but very minimal attention is put to it. Talk of water, for example, right now, the wash sector in the government or in the Ministry of Water Resources receive only from the government 0.1% budget. And this 0.1% is mainly goes to operational cost or salaries. So basically, when you talk about actual budget towards implementation of this project, it's not there from the government. And so we, or rather the government relies so much on the partners that is bringing budget in the table. And the government also has, the partners or development partners have got limitations. We seek this money from the donors. And with the current crisis, the donors are also hesitant to give the money because of the situation. They are not free to give their money. And they are saying, many of them would say that until the country becomes stable, like the Honorable Minister said before, we were not able to give you this money. So it put these services hostage, really, because we cannot do without funding. And so this is a major problem when it comes to challenge. Due to insecurity in the country also, cost of implementing wash services in South Sudan is completely very expensive as compared to other countries within the East African community and beyond. When I would look at a small example, for example, if we want to drill a water well, in South Sudan, it costs us between $35,000 to $18,000. In other countries, this is only $5,000. Putting wash facilities in school cost us $70,000 to $35,000, which is not the case in other countries. And this is due to lack of infrastructure, the roads, the economic crisis, and as you know, most of the supplies are being imported from outside. So it makes the implementation or delivery of wash services completely very, very expensive. The other challenge is, of course, the large scale emergencies that we are in for. One panelist has talked about the flooding. Right now, there is flooding, particularly in the upper part of the South Sudan. The flooding is becoming an issue, and IDPs, conflicts. I mean, the variability of the problems are too many. So this all put together brings challenges when it comes to problems or addressing wash needs in South Sudan. I mean, in the simple word, problems of wash in South Sudan or wash intervention depends on seasons, depends on community, or the variability depends from community to another. The issue of capacity, I would not end before talking about the capacity issue. Capacity across the whole level of the implementation, particularly from the lower level, are more pronounced, where you find yourself, the partners are doing the implementation with no representation of the duty barriers. And so when it comes to sustainability, it becomes an issue. The more partners will go on ground, put on the facilities, and they just come out because they are time bound. The implementation is time bound. They go implement and they come out. The next day, these facilities are completely not working. As a recent study tells us that there is about 70% of the wash facilities in South Sudan is not operational. And most of these facilities are put by partners. When they are put, there are no people to hand over to them. If they are there, the capacity within the wash sector is not there. So this is one issue that we are also hustling with. So sustainability aspect of the wash becomes a big problem. Women participation in the wash sector across the level. Like I said earlier, women are not considered as, when we talk about participation of women, we should not just be talking of women taking care of the wash facilities when it's ready. We're talking of whether women are involved right from the planning, the implementation, and onward, which is not the case in South Sudan. When we sit with the authorities to discuss the water facilities needs and issues, you find in the table, particularly in my case, I find myself sometimes alone in the table, sitting with the men discussing issues related to water. And so this definitely poses an issue of why women are not involved in this sector, particularly in South Sudan. But it's not only in South Sudan. WASH, women participation in WASH, it's a global issue that organizations like UNICEF is addressing it and pushing to the relevant authority to ensure that women are the primary responsible the primary responsible people that needs to be involved in the decision making when it comes to WASH. The final challenge I will want to talk about it is the scale of need. It's very enormous in South Sudan. Like I said, we are not able to reach those people who are really in need of these services because of the security. Yet South Sudan is a member state that is being monitored to report on the Sustainable Development Goal. From now to 2030, we have very minimal time to report. But as I talked about the coverage when it comes to WASH services in South Sudan, it's still very, very low. So that then posed the country into the question of whether South Sudan will really be closer to meeting the target or not. Certainly, I would say with confidence that we might reach the target when it comes to water supply, but we might not need the target when it comes to sanitation. Because if the country stands at the 14% coverage and the stability is still an issue, that means it's a concern whether the country will be reporting positive impact when it comes to sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rose, for raising some of these very critical challenges. And three things stand out to me. The first thing is the political will to address these issues and the issue of funding. I mean, no matter how much partners bring into a country, it's important that as a country we are able to provide certain amount of funding to address our basic needs and services. And the issue of capacity is something that is also very important because without the right people in some of these spaces, no matter how much great work the partners, the development partners do, if there's no right people that are able to take over from them, as you mentioned, then it's almost a waste of work. So thank you so much for highlighting these very important issues. I want to move quickly to Dr. Anne. There has been a lot of conversation. There has been a lot of talk about COVID-19 and environmental health. Is there a relation between these two? And if you can bring this relation or this example close to the context of South Sudan. Over to you, Dr. Anne.
Thank you, Paleki, for that question. Well, COVID-19, of course, we know is the current pandemic that's affecting the world. And it has a lot of relation to environmental health, which people might not be aware of. So the thing with COVID-19 is that it is thought to be what we call a zoonosis, which means that it was a disease that was specifically affecting certain animals. And what they talk about is the civet cats and bats. And it's basically a virus of bats and cats. Now, the issue where it relates to environment and environmental protection is that because of human beings encroaching into animal habitats, then there is exposure of the human population to viruses that generally would not affect humans. But because of that interaction between the human beings and animals that we would not necessarily come into contact with, then the viruses find ways to jump from the animals to the humans. And this is what was thought to be sort of the origin of coronavirus. And it has links to deforestation, to us not actually respecting the habitats of animals, or us going and trying to turn wild animals into food. And that has led to this pandemic actually coming into being. So protection of the environment is very important when you talk about COVID-19. Now, when we look specifically at the South Sudanese situation, we are aware that the disease is in our country, and we know that we have certain practices in terms of, I don't know whether to call it cultural, behavioral practices that can contribute to spread. Rose has talked a lot about water and sanitation facilities and the fact that we are not meeting the targets in terms of what is globally acceptable. So if we have a disease that is spread by droplets, and droplets can mean you're either coughing it in the air or it's falling on surfaces. If you don't have access to clean water, to hand washing facilities, then definitely you're going to see a very high risk of spread, and the level of spread is going to be at a percentage that cannot actually be mitigated unless wash facilities are actually provided. Then we will be able to stop the spread, because one of the main ways of stopping the spread of coronavirus is actually hand washing. So that is something that we need to look into. Now, the other thing about South Sudan's situation is the issues with overcrowding in homes where multiple families live together in very not well ventilated houses. And of course, respiratory illnesses have a tendency of spreading in places that are not well ventilated and in places where there are too many people. And coronavirus is an illness that's considered a respiratory illness, even though eventually it affects other organs. But primarily it spreads because of people coughing in the air. Imagine if you were 10 people in a very small room, then it's very, very easy for the disease to spread and affect more people in the community. The other thing is some of our behavioral tendencies. If you walk around the streets of Juba, I haven't been there in a long time, but the days when I was there, you would actually see people spitting all over the place. Spit contains infective organisms, okay? It might not be as much as what is found in what we call respiratory secretions, but there's definitely some degree of virus particles there. So if we go ahead with these behaviors where we're spitting all over the place and people are coming into contact with these secretions from our body, then definitely we will expect that there will be spread of the disease. So coronavirus can be looked at in multiple ways. One, the fact that we have encroached into animal habitats and therefore a disease has jumped from animals to human beings. When it comes to South Sudan, we're talking about the built environment, the availability of wash facilities. People actually know about hygiene and hygiene promotion and the practices that are related to hygiene, and actually doing what is supposed to be done in relation to practicing hygienic practices. And if that does not happen, then definitely we are at a situation where if this pandemic decides to become really, really bad and spread the way it has spread in other countries in Europe in our society, then we are at very huge risk of having very many people affected and many people dying. And it all ties up to the fact of us not having the facilities necessary to do the basic preventative measures, which is washing hands and practicing hygiene, and the fact that there's a lot of overcrowding in our communities within Sudan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Anne. And I think the things that you mentioned actually highlighted some of the things that sometimes we don't pay attention to. Our lifestyles, our way of living sometimes can contribute, but sometimes because we're so used to doing things in a certain way, we tend to not connect the dots and see how our lifestyles can contribute to further spreading of this disease. But thank you for highlighting these. I think these are very, very important points. I want to move to Nyamach. As an environmentalist, as you said, you've been doing a lot of lobbying, a lot of advocacy in the area of environmental protection. Can you maybe highlight some of the challenges that you face in your work, and if there are any specific programs that you carry out that actually target women or are geared towards educating women? Over to you.
Okay, thanks once again, Paleke. As an environmentalist, there are numerous challenges that we're actually facing in this field. First of all, we, as the previous speaker talked on lack of political will, you'll find there's no political will to conserve the environment. We talk a lot, but little is done by our politicians. So the other problem that we face is, we find that there is lack of awareness in these terms, in this issue, and many people are not aware. And when people are not aware, they will actually resist what you're trying to talk about. Because, like, for instance, personally, where I live, I talk to my neighbors, hey, Jamal, let us come and put our hands together, since we actually don't have a proper waste management scheme in South Sudan. And some of the areas are not accessible due to our poor infrastructure. So when you go to them and talk, let us put hands together, maybe hire a truck that can come and collect our garbage and take it away from here. people actually will refuse and they resist, because they're actually not aware of the environment, that if trash is being burned, because most of household in Juba or in South Sudan in general, they actually burn their garbages. And you can imagine the garbage that is burned contains plastic bottles, a lot of plastic things that are being burned that have a lot of toxins that are released into our air. They will think, I'm just getting rid of this, instead of paying that little money that you can contribute to get a truck and take it away. They don't actually see the impact of all these things that they're doing around. When it's raining in Juba, people come out with their waste and they actually pour it into water that is flowing, and it's just taken and it doesn't go far from them. So there is no awareness. These people don't know that this garbage that I would just dispose in that running water, it doesn't go very far from me. It's going to end up blocking the streams, the drainages, and that one would actually contribute so much on, the water will be stagnant, which make it a very good place for mosquitoes to breed, and which will come back to us, because the same person who disposed, that mosquito will come back to you and you'll get malaria. So we have little awareness, which is a big challenge that we're facing. And then we have lack of prioritization. Environmental issues are not prioritized, in the government, in everywhere, in institution, even we have our companies. I work for NILPET. I work in the Department of Safety, Health and Environment, but we're actually doing very little in the environmental section. We don't do much. We just deal with health and safety, But the environmental section, we are doing nothing. The same applies to many institutions in South Sudan. Every institution actually have to have an environmental department where they are dealing with waste management. How are they disposing their garbage? How are they collecting and all this? So we have lack of prioritization in all the aspects. It's a big challenge we're facing. And when you don't have priorities, if our environment is not a priority, even when we come, we'll find it a very big challenge, because that thing is not already in the list of importance. It's maybe down somewhere, and it will make it very hard for us to push, because it's already down somewhere in the list. We also have, the main thing is also corruption, which is not just in the environmental issues, but it's cutting across all the sectors. Corruption, when we talk of corruption, people will always think corruption is just taking money from the government office and all this, but corruption is everything. Misuse of your powers. Some people are using their powers to intimidate, the environmental activists, or those people who are, trying to protect the environment, like in the oil fields. We're having a lot of issues. We're having a lot of environmental issues that have to be addressed. But because of some people, their position power, they actually intimidate and they block everything, and everything will just stop there. That is corruption, because that power is not there to intimidate. It's there to make things happen, to change things, So this corruption issue is a lot of problem. We also have people who have been paid, like all the issues that are happening. One of our presenters said that, the government actually, they don't disbelieve. But I don't think it's only just disbelief. Some may not believe that things are happening, but some of them know that this is happening. But just because you're being paid by that Chinese company or that foreign company, it's just paying you like 10% of the whole project, then you just drop it. But not knowing that this, actually what you're doing, it's going to affect you yourself, it's going to affect your children, and then the whole generation of South Sudan is going to be affected by just that, getting that 100,000 or 1 million US dollars. You may see that it's a lot of money, but actually the destruction that will come from the activity that you're actually supporting will be billions of dollars, and it will cost the country a lot. So this corruption, it's actually main challenge that we are facing as environmentalists, and and with other sectors. So the other issue that we face is our cultural, our cultural backgrounds, the cultural issues. That some cultures, I think some cultures in South Sudan, or generally in South Sudan, we are people who love dirtiness. People don't care so much about the environment. They don't care about our surrounding. We will want to look good and all this, but some cultural issues, they actually encourage these activities. And once you come to such a community that they are set into that setting, it will be very difficult to come and penetrate, and it will take a lot of effort to tell them about environmental issues. For instance, some people will know that I'll have to clear any green thing around my area, or we have to clear all these trees because this tree for our ancestors is not supposed to grow in a certain place. But you don't know that this tree is actually providing you with oxygen. It's providing you with a lot of things, because within that tree, we have a lot of biodiversity. We have insects, we have birds, we have a lot of things that are actually supporting the cycle, our cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and these other life cycles. So when they are bound with cultural things, they will say that I don't want this tree here. It has to go away, because our ancestors never used to keep it. If we keep it, it will kill people or it will do this. So cultural issues are main issues in environmental protection. We have our mindsets, which are actually coming to our cultural issues also. Our mindsets are that, when we do campaigns, telling people we have to clean our surrounding, don't burn the garbage, this and that will happen. They will tell you, no, we have been living like that, and it has been like that, and we have not seen anything, but they are not knowing that the asthmas that we are having are from these things. These other respiratory problems that we are having are actually from these things, but they don't know, but they just set their mind like that. So Paleki, these are main challenges that as environmentalists we're actually facing in this country.
Thank you very much, Nyamach. And I think the last few minutes we've dedicated it to highlighting of the issues, the challenges, and the obstacles in ensuring that we have a safe environment that is secure for future generations. So I want to take this last round to basically look forward. What is the way forward? What recommendations do you have as with all the challenges that you have mentioned? What are some of the solutions or some of the way forward to addressing some of these issues in your respective sectors? I want to start with you, Nyamach, then over to Dr. Anne, and then we move forward. And I'm only giving you 1 minute strictly to give your concluding remarks and your way forward.
All
so
right.
Nyamach, over.
All right. Yeah, thank you once again. The way forward for all these issues that we have, actually, the first thing is that we really need a political will, that our politicians, we call upon them to have a political will and prioritize environmental issues, and the other one, we really need to do a mass campaign like what we are doing now. We are educating. We have many people, many women around the world who are watching this, and actually in South Sudan, that, we are educating them. This is part of environmental education. Environmental education is really needed. We need a lot of massive awareness campaign for all environmentalists, women, because women are actually affected in most cases. We are affected. It was highlighted by previous people who have spoken that when there are droughts, is women who have gone very far places to go and look for water, to go and look for firewood. It is women who will be busy burning the charcoals and doing all this. So we have to engage our women, and we have to build our capacity. We have to enlighten ourselves on environmental issues, because we are actually the carers. We are actually giving care. We are the one who are bringing up future leaders. We are the one who are taking care of the future generations. So I will urge all women in South Sudan, it is our mandate. Environmental issues are collective issues. You just don't sit at your home and fold your hands and say that the government will do it, or the Ministry of Environment is going to do it, or the Ministry of Water or Agriculture. It's our collective responsibility, and everyone has to do it, because when it's come, if we will blame it on Honorable Josephine, it's not only her who is going to get the consequences, it's all of us. But I will also urge the Minister of Environment to really encourage law enforcement. The Environmental Policy 2016 has a lot, and it's a very good document that has everything that it takes for us to protect the environment, but there is little law enforcement. So I encourage the government to prioritize environmental issues. I'll encourage all the citizens, for us all to come, clean your house, clean your compound, don't burn your garbage, and I believe we will have a better environment and a safer environment to live in, and also to live for our future generation. Let me just conclude with this, that there is a quote that is always said that it's until when the last fish is caught and the last river has dried and the last tree has been cut off, when we will realize that we cannot eat money. So the time is now. Let us not wait for our rivers to be poisoned. Let us not wait for our trees to be cut, all of them. Let us not wait for the last fish to be caught. The time is now for us to act, to save our environment and to protect it. Thank you very much. And I really enjoyed this session. And we look forward to have more of this for us to protect our environment in South Sudan. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Nyamach, and I appreciate your concluding remarks. And as an activist, I hear your passion through your words, and I hear all that you say. So thank you so much, and thank you for being with us. I'm going to be very, very strict with time. I'm going to move over to you, Dr. Anne. And if you see me raise my hand, you know the 1 minute is over, because we have to also be committed to the time frame that we have allocated for this discussion. So, Dr. Anne, over to you. Concluding remarks, way forward.
Thank you, Paleki. I think Nyamach has mentioned something called the circle of life. The circle of life basically means that everything is interconnected. And what we have to mention is something called the One Health approach. That is something that many states and governments are looking into. And it basically states that we need to realize that there's an interconnection between every living being in this planet. The animals, the plants, human beings, the aquatic animals, there is an interconnection. And if one is unbalanced, then the other one is affected. And therefore, I think my main point today would be to say that when it comes to environmental issues, we have to think about it in a multi-sectorial way, in a multidisciplinary way. So we're not only including environmentalists, we're including politicians, we're including civil society, we're including scientists, we're including doctors, we're including the communities at the basic level who can make sure that some of these things are actually taken into account and done. And therefore, we should not look at it in a narrowed way. We have to think about it widely and involve people of many disciplines, because that is what will make the difference.
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you for the summary. And I really like the point that you made, because as the panelists kept speaking, that is the point that kept coming out from all the panelists, that you can address this only from one perspective. It's not only a health issue or a legal issue, it's a multi-sectoral issue. So thank you so much for concluding with that. Nyanton, over to you. Strictly 1 minute. Concluding remarks.
Okay, so I think as a conclusion, studies have shown South Sudan environment, temperature has increased by 1%, our rainfall has decreased by 10 to 20%. So climate change is a real issue in South Sudan. We are facing a lot of conflict, poverty. These things even makes it worse with climate change. So my recommendation would be, we really need to create awareness within South Sudan, either within the government, the community, the organizations, that climate change is here to stay, and we need to start changing some of our ways in terms of farming, in terms of relying on wild fish, wildlife, and things like that. We have to come up with new ways on how to support ourselves in terms of adapting. So as well with the government, we really need like climate change policy. It's now it's part of the environmental policy, but I think it needs a standalone policy and regulations, things like that. And on the oil field, pollution, our recommendation has been very strong that yes, the environmental and impact assessment need to be done in a transparent way. We at Student Institute, we have actually suggested that we as a research institute, we would like to be the eye of the community, eye of the people, so that we are part of this scientific study, so that at least as well, when people complain, we say that this study was actually done very well. So we want civil society, all the community to really follow this environmental and impact assessment that is actually on the way. And thank you so much. And I'm glad to be on this panel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nyanton. And thank you for your concluding remarks. It's very much appreciated. Ms. Rose, I'll move over to you. 1 minute for your concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, my sisters. And I think Many has already been said, but I want to add my voice or echo what my sisters have said, that there is no other day or there is no other time for us to come together to rescue our environment. It's now, because our generation is looking up unto us, and I think tomorrow we will be questioned on what have we done to ensure that the environment is safe for our next generation. And so my recommendation or way forward is I think we need to continue dialoguing and advocacy with the government and the respective stakeholders, that environment is not a matter of just a sector without attention. Environment can affect our livelihood, and so we need to continue with the advocacy. We need to continue dialoguing with our people, with our government, particularly the issue of the resources. We cannot do anything without resources until and unless the government realize that this is an important issue and it has to be prioritized. So resources has to be availed to ensure that these issues are tackled off. So the last one, I want to talk about women participation across, right from the upstream to lower stream. That means looking at the household, looking at every level, the women has to be engaged. And maybe probably next time when we're doing this kind of discussion, we are not discussing for us as experts, but we are discussing looking at what is happening in our community. Maybe it's also best to see how we can engage one person or a woman down there to be part of this panel and see how they feel, how they really feel, because that way we will get to know more on what really people are feeling and what they really want us to do as women of South Sudan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rose. I appreciate your concluding remarks. I want to move on to Honorable Wodo to give also her concluding remarks and recommendations.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paleki. First of all, I just want to draw the attention of our viewers to what South Sudan has done as a country. As a country, South Sudan, we are signatory of 3 of Rio Conventions and also the Montreal Protocol, and these are really very, very important protocols for the environment and climate change. And South Sudan, as the Ministry of Environment, they have a strategy to combat climate change. And if we as a government, as politicians, we stick to these strategies, the first of all is the afforestation of our forest. That really will be good. And if we do smart agriculture, and also if we establish early warning systems so that our people, our citizens knows if there is a disaster coming, if there's floods or droughts coming, and also to build the capacity on climate change and awareness to our public. The other thing is that, which I really want to conclude with it, is as legislators and as politicians, we have to fight so that this sector has an adequate budget, because the budget which is given towards those sectors are really very minimum, and you can't do anything. The Honorable Minister is there. She is a witness that what is given is so less, you can't imagine. Maybe it will just take salaries. I've been with her in Juba, and I was telling her about how we need to do something about Juba, because our city is really filthy. I'm sorry to say this, and I've seen that as ministry they're working. I've approached the Juba Council, and they are also doing some work, but also we need to enforce the laws which are in place. And part of our problem is that the insecurity. We really, all our problems as South Sudanese, really, number one of them is insecurity, because if you can't have the security to do your work, you will end up by not doing anything, because previously 2 of the wildlife officers has been shot dead because they were doing their work in protecting the wildlife areas, but they couldn't do that because somebody has come and killed them. The other thing is that I just want to conclude that we really need to enact laws which can protect our environment and raise the awareness of our people, especially the children, because they are the next generation who are coming. Because right now, when you talk about environment, when you talk about climate change, most of our people see that it's something foreign for us. It's happening in America, the cyclone. They think it's things which are not really near to us, but climate change is real and it's affecting us. So I want just us to raise the awareness of the children, if we can include it in the curriculum from baby classes even to the secondary, and from there to be taken by the youth. I can see our youth now doing marvelous things in Juba City and the outside skirts of Juba, and also in the other states. They're really doing well. Part of them is the Sud Institute. I'm really proud of them because I've been there from the inception of the Sud Institute, and what they're doing is really very good. So let's work together as a government, as politicians, as civil society, as women, because we constitute 60%, more than 60% of the South Sudanese. So if we talk to our neighbors, to the local women about climate change in a very simple way, not all this convention and all these big vocabularies, but we just simplify it for them so that they can check 1 or 2, 3 things, and upon them applying these things, I think we can mitigate and control the climate change for our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Wodo, and thank you for your recommendations. I want to give this last opportunity to Honorable Josephine to give her concluding remarks and also way forward. Over to you, Honorable Josephine. Please unmute your mic. Okay.
Yeah, thanks again, Paleki. I think it has been an honor for me to be in this panel of discussion. I think to mitigate all these challenges mentioned above, we actually need to cooperate and collaborate with all the stakeholders and developmental partners in order for us to look into the issues of environment, and especially in the forest sector. Most of us have been speaking about the forest, especially the logging and the destruction of our forest, which we know that this actually brings the problem of climate change. Most of our forests in South Sudan has been destructed. And for us to stop all this is actually for us to come together and work as one body, and especially the women, since we know that all this affects the women and children. The other recommendation that I would give is actually about peace. I think peace is paramount, and all of us need sustainability of peace in our country for us to do all this. And also the law enforcement. We all know that there is non-compliance of the laws in our republic, and more especially when you come into our law enforcing agencies. I just want to give an example of one ministerial order that we have done so far from the ministry. There was banning of plastic bags in East African community, but most of the business people bring in the plastic bags into the Republic of South Sudan, and we found out that South Sudan became one of the dumping sites. And as a ministry, we came up with a ministerial banning the importation of plastic bags within South Sudan. But now there are some people smuggling the plastic bags inside South Sudan. And all this is because of the cooperation between them, those on smuggling, and our law enforcing agencies. So it is very important for us actually to put laws and actually to talk and to go into those institutions and talk to them, more especially the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Security, and the rest of the institutions that are related to security. I think also prioritizing the Ministry of Environment is also paramount. Of course, as I told you earlier, Ministry of Environment is not actually treated as one of the important ministries that deals with the human life. And then the other thing also is the ministry's budget. As I told you earlier, is limited. It also needs to be increased. And also we need to encourage our people to do the plantation of the trees. Though I know right now may not be possible, but with time, they will actually get used to the importance of the environment. I think with this, I want to thank all the panelists, and I'm happy to join you, and I hope that we'll come again and discuss more other issues.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Honorable Josephine, for these concluding remarks and recommendations that you've made. I just want to conclude also with just three main takeaways that can summarize our discussion for the last 2+ hours. One of the things that has been repeated many times by many panelists is that it takes everyone. It's everyone's job to protect the environment. It's not an individual's job. It's all stakeholders' job, and it needs a multi-sectoral approach. The second thing is that environmental climate change, global warming is not something very far. It's something very near. It affects our day-to-day lives. It affects our livelihoods. And it's also an issue of an accountability to future generations. It's not only about us, but it's about the unborn children that are coming into this world, and they need to have a safe and good environment to live in. The last thing is that it's important to have an enabling policy and legal framework for people to operate and to effect these securing of the environment and protection of the environment. However, as individuals, we can take individual steps and initiatives on our parts as individuals to protect our environment, our surroundings, etc. So I want to really thank each and every panelist for their time, for their expertise, for sharing. And I think this conversation is a conversation that needs to happen again, and we go into more details. We only had 2 hours today. But I honestly want to sincerely appreciate everyone for your time and sharing your ideas, sharing your thoughts and your expertise. And I look forward for us to have a near future conversation again in the near future. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, ladies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.